Welcome everyone to Thriving Divorce and Separation, a conscious hub for all those looking to navigate the process of separation or divorce differently, in a way that is conscious, collaborative, and compassionate, in a way that really honors the well-being of all members of a separating family unit as a whole, and in a way that really supports and empowers you to generate the foundations for an evolved family dynamic in the post-separation landscape that really thrives. Because I truly believe that divorce doesn't have to mean destruction and separation doesn't have to mean broken. No, it can mean evolved. It may be different, but it can be evolved and still thriving in a new shape and form. And I'm here to support people to create that. Now, with that said, for those of you who don't know me, my name is Cara Ogden. I'm a former Australian family lawyer, converted to a conscious and collaborative family law facilitator and coach. I also have training in conscious uncoupling specifically as well. I have such a passion for supporting individuals navigating through the separation process, individuals and couples, both from the contemplation stage through to final agreements and beyond in co-parenting. And ultimately, it is that parental aspect that is really, really dear in my heart, supporting parents and families to really, support their children throughout the process and create new structures that are going to honor the well-being of parents and children alike so that we are not imparting unnecessary, stress and trauma upon our children and the next generation. So, with that said, I am really passionate about doing divorce differently. And I'm also very clear, having moved through it myself, that whilst I am fostering a really, phenomenal binuclear family dynamic with my son's father and the way that we set things up, I'm very clear that what's best for one family and what's going to allow support one family to thrive may not support the next. Ultimately, it's about providing individuals the tools, resources, and options that allow them to get clear as to what may work for their own unique family. Okay, and also understanding that, the way that things have always been done may not be the best for what's your particular family. There may be other ways that you may want to do things that may better support the unique needs and well-being of your family. So this is what I'm up for here in supporting individuals to create. And with that said, because I do take a conscious and collaborative approach to how I support people, I love working with other professionals and like-minded individuals who, support others in separation and divorce to do it differently as well. Okay, I love talking to real people. And today we're going to be talking to another real person, a real professional supporting those moving through separation and divorce by the name of Jordan Vaka of Planning Solo. So Jordan is also a collaborative practitioner, but in his role, it's in the financial space. And he also loves supporting individuals to navigate, some of life's biggest transitions, including divorce and separation, and bringing in that collaborative approach to the process, particularly around navigating those financial matters, right, that people invariably confront when they move through separation, divorce, and having to restructure their financial arrangements and untangle the financial web between you. And this is part of Jordan's role. So, with that said, I'd like to extend a very, very warm welcome to Jordan. So, good afternoon now, Jordan. We just hit over midday, so it is technically afternoon. Thank you so much for joining me today. I'm really excited to have you in this conversation as a real person helping real people through separation and divorce. So, to
Well,
begin with, I would love for you just to, tell me how you are and share with me a little bit about, who you are and what you do.
yeah, brilliant. Well, thank you so much for having me on, Cara. I'm looking forward to this chat. It's something that I think I can talk underwater about this kind of work because it is really important and brings a lot of meaning into the practice that I get to work in. We were just talking about it being school holidays, so that's presented some challenges. But other than that, everything is going very well. All's good. Um, yeah, and so, yeah, as you mentioned, I'm a financial advisor. I work with people going through big transitions, primarily divorce, bereavement, and retirement. And so we get to work with a lot of people going through some pretty ordinary times, but I think we help them get through it a bit easier, is my hope.
Mm. Well, I have no doubt that you do, particularly with, the lens and scope that you bring to and skills that you bring to the clientele that you have. So thanks for sharing a bit about that. And can you tell me a little bit about your background then? What brought you into the financial planning space? You've always been in that space, or did you start somewhere else and make a shift?
I've always been in the space, so I went to university, didn't really know what I was going to do. I did a fundamentals of financial advice unit and loved it. One of the
Mm,
things I always struggled with commerce was the connection between numbers and people.
mm,
The numbers bit, I wanted a job where I was able to talk to people, and financial planning is very much that. So I came out, worked through the system, banks, small firms, all of that. Decided to go out on my own just after the GFC hit, which was, in hindsight, not my cleverest decision. But it worked out pretty well. Over time, realized that the people I loved working with were the people that were looking for somebody to trust. Uh, Trust helped them navigate these really big things. Trust is a really
mm,
important part of how I approach the work, and it means a great deal. So realized then that of our sort of favorite 10 clients or 10 people we worked with, most of them were divorced women in their 50s and 60s, and really started exploring why that was, and came to the realization that we were seeing these people too late. A lot of the mistakes and a lot of the issues had already been made. And so we were trying to repair things, and it's a bit harder once everything's been broken to put it back together.
mm.
So I started looking at how we can help earlier on, get involved a bit earlier on in the process, and yeah, it's just rolled on from there.
Amazing. Thanks for sharing that. So, yeah, your business, it's Planning Solo is the name of it. That
Correct.
correct? Yeah, thanks. Yeah. So, thought it'd be helpful for people to understand that's where you are and that's what you do. And I'd love to hear a little bit about, okay, what is your ethos or mission for your business? You've spoken a little bit about supporting or having a special interest, in supporting, those women in those spaces, but I'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, for me, it's very much we have kind of an internal motto in the business, and it's pretty much honor their trust. And
Mm,
it's very much finding people where they need to be helped, helping them as long as they need us to help them for, but doing so in a way that I think makes them feel good about the work we're doing.
hmm
Financial advice hasn't always had the greatest interaction with single people, particularly women. It doesn't have the greatest reputation in some areas, so we're trying to repair that a little bit. Our
mm,
approach is very bespoke. We have very clear kind of pathways that we work with people on, but the work is very bespoke, very individual. Every person is treated like an individual, as I think
mm.
is that's how I would like to be treated by another professional. So that's
Yeah.
very much what I like to bring to the work.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And there's a one size fits all model is not really how it works best in these spaces, I find as well in supporting people in the capacity that I do through separation and divorce. And I love the concept of the bespoke process, right? And if you're talking about supporting people through various pathways, what sort of pathways do you tend to support people with?
Yeah, so I mean, focus on the divorce side.
Mm,
Bereavement is very much, generally after the fact, we step in and we do kind of
mm,
traditional advice, but in a different way. But on the divorce side, I break it down into kind of the before, during, and after phase of the process. I have helped some people in the before phase where they're starting to work out, okay, I think this relationship's over. What are some of my next steps?
mm,
Sometimes it's preparing financially for that big shift. Sometimes it's talking to other professionals like yourself to try to find out what the best option for them as a family is.
mm-hmm,
So I've done a little bit of work there. As an advisor, I don't work with people like existing clients that are divorcing. Any financial advisor out there will tell you that we should be referring at least one party out. So we do that.
mm-hmm,
Um, the during phase is where I think we're going to talk a little bit today about the collaborative side. That's where I participate in a collaborative divorce process or through a mediation, or sometimes through we're just getting engaged by somebody this morning. They're going to trial and they want some information and some reports to help support their lawyer. So it's about getting through that part of the process. And I think when we've spoken before about this, I very much see that as it's a tunnel that people have entered into, and we need to get them out the other side as cleanly, as dryly, and as safely as possible. And that tunnel twists and turns and gets muddy and it gets, scary. That's our job to get you through that.
mm-hmm,
After the during phase, it's very much after. So it's, I now have this pot of money, this complexity, these structures I don't really understand. What do I do now? I don't want to make any mistakes. I want to make sure I'm set up. I'm intimidated or scared of money. Maybe there was some issues in the relationship prior that left people with a bit of baggage with that. It's very much just helping them rebuild and get to the point where they can be confident about their money, and that can take as long
mm.
as it takes.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I love the aspect, I suppose, that the role that financial play in the process of supporting people to get that clarity. Because from my perspective, what I witnessed in a lot of people, there is a lot of stress and a lot of angst, and often a lot of, you know, conflict that's generated from the space of the uncertainty, right?
Mhm.
Because
Yeah.
they don't know their options, they don't know the best path forward. They're maybe hearing lots of different things from lots of different people that may not be particularly helpful, that gets keeps them kind of stuck, right? As opposed to, I mean, information and knowledge is power in this space, and having that clarity as to, okay, if I do this, I might actually be okay, as opposed to
Yeah.
sitting in that space of, I'm not okay. And if I'm not okay, my nervous system is activated and I'm not making good decisions. And
Like
yeah,
it's so true that that fear drives that nervous system reaction. I think
yeah,
that's
it
where
does.
really good coaching and support makes such a big difference.
Yeah, absolutely. And understand as well that you mentioned that, so you do work in the collaborative space as I do myself and supporting people with the collaborative framework approach to dispute resolution or conflict resolution in the family law space. Or even sometimes it's not even just conflict. People just come to you and say, we have all this stuff and we don't really know the next step, but we want to sort it out and we want to try and work it out together, and of course there's conflicts in that because that's very normal and human, right? You've
Mm.
got competing interests and needs and the like. So there's going to be areas of contention, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you have to be in conflict in the sense of, going to court. So I'd love to speak into, yeah, for you to speak into a little bit about your role in that framework, if that's okay.
I think the point you've made there is one of the things I learned fairly early on in the process. Working in this space, I think I've evolved a lot in my thinking and my approach to things. And one of them is about conflict.
Mm,
The idea I probably had before was that all conflict is bad and should be avoided. And it's absolutely not the case. As you say, you have two people now that just simply have competing interests, even if it's as amicable as possible. So it's about navigating that conflict in a way that's respectful, but treats people where they are and gets them to the resolution they need to be at. And I think collaborative is a really good option for people that are in that space where they can sit in a room and have that discussion. I really like the collaborative process, by the way. So as a financial, I'll sit in there and I'll work with people prior to the big negotiation meeting. A lot of that is getting an idea of the family financial picture, but also the family financial history. How have they made financial decisions before? How have they come to big and small decisions around money before? What do they think of their partner's mindset around money and vice
mm,
versa? What are some of the areas of conflict that have arisen around money before? That's a really big one, because
mm,
every couple you adopt part of the labor of being in a couple. And so, how do you navigate that with money, which is such a contentious issue? It's really good to know before we go into the meeting.
mm-hmm,
We
mm-hmm,
then do all the data gathering and the research and the discovery work that we need to do. We get profit and loss statements and we get bank statements and all this stuff. And then we have another meeting with the clients and we bring them both up to speed about where their money is. And it gives them a chance to ask us all the questions that they either never wanted to ask before or the dynamic of the relationship, they couldn't ask it or they stopped asking it.
mm-hmm,
And that's a really, I think, a really valuable service because often in a couple there's one who managed the money and there's one who didn't.
mm-hmm,
The one who manages the money often feels a lot of pressure and guilt around the performance or otherwise of the money. So they get really sensitive and really activated, to use your term earlier. Um, the other person gets really, they're kind of fine to delegate it, but when things go wrong, they get really nervous and they realize I've maybe over delegated here. So they get really activated.
mm-hmm,
So if we can short circuit that in the negotiation, we are then dealing more with facts and everybody's a lot more comfortable and aware of where things are. And I find that can help the negotiation not get too heated because the other big thing we do, and I've realized I can talk underwater about this. The other big the other big thing we do, and this is where financial planners, I think, are really valuable in the process, and I think coaching is very much aligned to the same thing. We help people set goals.
Yes,
And our friends, family lawyers, bless them, that's not really a big part of their job. A big part of their job is navigating that tunnel.
yes,
Whereas
yeah.
we're helping them set the destination and
Mm.
we can then reality test that. And I think that can help in that context.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you for sharing that. And I think there's a couple of things that I just want to touch on that you spoke into there.
That I just blurted
Yeah,
out.
like amazing. Like, yeah, so I think you're talking about getting clear on the different perspectives and how money was managed between the couple in the relationship is really, really helpful to understand if you're going to help them to navigate that now in the post-separation landscape where things are, more heightened. And,
Mm.
like we said, that uncertainty, that fear, and all of those things. And understanding the dynamic between them is also very important because there can be, I suppose, bubbling under the surface or resentments around that as well that can also be there. And sometimes the power imbalance, even if it's not a an abusive power imbalance, but a power imbalance that I often speak into, is generated just by the virtue of the roles that people, took, whether that was actually explicitly agreed or just what happened, as what happens in relationships, for what better or worse, this is what's happened. And sometimes resentments can form around that. And helping people to move through some of that in the process and gain some understanding, or like you said, touching on there something, how the person managing it can have a lot of guilt
Mm.
around, how they've managed it. And then the person over here and the other side of things may be blaming the other person and not recognizing the stress or pressure. So, there's two sides to every part. And when we can bring that to the awareness of both people in the process as well, which is partly what I do, it can help soften some of those resentments and soften some of those pains and allow a bit of more compassion and an open space to come together and resolve things moving forward and open new possibilities. So yeah, I really
Mm.
love that you've spoken to what you've seen, obviously come to witness throughout your clients and speaking to them and what they might share with you about their own experiences and being in those respective roles.
Yeah, I think where coaching works really well and adds so much to
Mm.
the process is I think it gives people permission to be empathetic to the other side.
Mm.
Whereas I think a more traditional pathway through divorce, or your friend's sister-in-law gets in your ear, or the bad stories, or the TV
Mm.
shows you've seen, you feel weak if you do that. But in
Yeah.
my experience, especially if there's children involved, there
Mm.
will be a relationship of some sort after this process. So
Hmm.
what benefit is there in burning everything down? If you
Yeah.
show compassion, as you're saying, and empathy, in my experience, it's a smoother path to a better resolution where you don't all
Yes.
hate each other at the end.
Yeah, absolutely. And I fully agree with that. Yeah, that being able to bring that peace in and that compassion piece. I mean, again, with respective boundaries, the collaborative process isn't for every relationship dynamic, but for many people,
Yeah.
it is a good option. And the traditional approach can unfortunately sometimes see people, um, take that hurt and that pain and resentment into an unhelpful, empowered state. Right. I'm standing up for myself now in a way that's, puts up the guard a little bit too high
Mm.
and then can actually, see outcomes that are, less ideal for the family as a whole moving forward, that leave you with further resentment, in my experience, and what might otherwise be possible if people were open to, taking this sort of approach and open to the coaching like you're speaking into here and opening to considering the other person's perspective as well
Mm.
as their own in the process, which I think, yeah, is incredibly valuable.
The
Um,
Sorry,
yeah,
the person I was talking to earlier, they're kind of on the railroad to trial, basically. And they've
yeah.
said, okay, so we've spent 150,000 so far. That'll double by the time we get to trial. Then there'll be the trial costs. And just in the conversation, it was a very initial chat, but it was very, very positional. There was no room for empathy and no room for compassion. So we had to have
Mm,
the conversation then around, okay, do you want this? And I think that kind of shook them because they'd never
mm.
been asked that. Like it's almost been a default pathway.
Yeah, yeah.
And if you haven't done the goal setting, I think, and that's not just, financial goals, it's emotional goals. Like how do you want
Mm.
to conduct yourself through this process?
Yeah,
Do
yeah,
you want,
100%.
if that's a priority, how do you want your kids to see you behave through this? Do you want them to see you as this warrior idea, or do you want something different?
Mm.
Without that, you end up just spinning in a circle, and it just costs you a lot of money. And I think that's just something that if we can help people avoid that, that's a good thing.
That's so very true. And, that's something that I really emphasize with my clients as well is, you know, I say to them, you wouldn't walk into an office to get your business structure set up without having a business plan or understanding what are my goals? What do I want to achieve here? Do I want to take this approach? Do I want to have some kind of resemblance of a relationship with my former spouse after this or not? And, it's not always appropriate, but getting clear on
Yeah,
that and understanding, whether that's what you want and how you want your children to experience the process and see you. All very valid questions that is, generally in my experience when I was practicing family law, very much overlooked in the process, unless you might be collaboratively trained, which
mm,
there's still very many people who are not, right? To bringing in that really, I suppose, coaching human element into the picture and, getting clear. So it is. And like you say, otherwise you end up in a default position, which is not really being directed by you. It is being directed by over-reliance on advice on other people because you don't know what you
yeah,
want or you don't know what you're
because
trying to achieve.
you're hurt and you're hurting, and
Yeah,
and you,
yeah.
you want to lash out sometimes, and like all of it is completely understandable and valid. But I
Mm.
think you would agree, like the best outcomes come from people that are intentional about what they actually want. You may not
Yeah,
always get it, but at least we know what direction we're driving in, and I
yeah,
think that
that's
makes a big
right.
difference.
That's right. And you're right. You might not always get it, but your experience of the process is going to be better, in my
Mm.
experience. Like it's going to be a more positive experience, right? As opposed to one that's, yeah, adding fuel to fire, right? Yeah.
It leaves you with agency too, doesn't it? Because
Yeah,
you are controlling it as much as you can in that process, rather
that's
than just
right.
being dragged along.
being dragged along and being controlled by well, I was speaking to the reptilian part of the brain driving the brain wheel, right? You're not really in control in that situation,
Mm.
right? Your nervous system is, and that's a disempowered state. So yeah, I really appreciate where this conversation has gone. I could talk about this stuff for days on end too. I do love speaking about this stuff, but I will move on so before we not so we're not here all day. But so I suppose what would you say about the biggest misconceptions around collaborative practice might be in terms of, how people, what it may cost or what it may involve? Like, so what are some of the biggest misconceptions?
Yeah, I think the biggest one is around cost, and I think it's a misconception that's held by clients and potential clients, but also I think sometimes by other practitioners, family lawyers in particular.
Mm,
I think sometimes the cost of an interdisciplinary collaborative process with everybody involved in all of the meetings, in the ones I've been in, has been quoted up front. And so it's quoted as
mm,
quite a big number. It could be 30, 40, 50, $60,000, which is a confronting number to see. But the average family law matter is probably going to fall into some realm of that anyway, but you just don't
mm,
know till the end. And one thing collaborative practice does, it does it very explicitly. So I don't think it's included in the alternative. If the alternative is a litigated pathway or through family lawyers,
mm,
what collaborative practice does is it internalizes all of the costs. So it brings in the cost of a financial, it brings in the cost of a coach and a psychologist, it brings in the cost of a case manager, um, and it just puts it on a silver platter and here's everything. Whereas I think let's quote unquote a normal process, most parties will have a financial advisor in the background helping them, or they'll have their accountant helping them.
mm,
Most of them will have a psychologist or coach helping them as well, because it is such a difficult and full-on process.
mhm,
Without a case manager, I mean, you would know this from your time as a family lawyer. Who runs things then? Because it's really hard to run a matter like this. And so you start relying on the lawyers to do it, and that's full on ad stress. Like the costs are there, they're just not quoted altogether. So I would wager in a lot of cases, a collaborative case, fully done, is probably going to end up cheaper than going down a traditional litigated pathway, even before trial, um,
mm.
when you factor in all these external costs.
Yeah.
Um, and there's also the embedded costs of, okay, litigated pathway, I'm probably more likely to cater to my, let's call it worse instincts and lead to an outcome where we're not feeling very good about each other and there's a lot of anger and that flows onto our relationship with our children. Like those are costs too that are
Mm.
ignored and they should be minimized, done well through a collaborative process.
Yeah, I 100% agree. And, we spoke about this previously, and it's almost like it's like the costs of the ordinary process, they are quite hidden. People don't consider a psychologist as the cost of a relationship breakdown. They don't
Mm,
consider the accountant as the cost. They just look at the legal cost as, that's it. And, the bigger costs for me are those costs that you were speaking to, the non-monetary costs, the stress, the conflict, the impact on your health and well-being, the fact that it impacts your parenting capacity when you're in the legal system for years and years because you're too focused on that. That's causing you so much stress, and there's science to support that
mm,
parenting capacities can be an impact for 2+ years post separation in the ordinary circumstances without ongoing litigation because of how much of a traumatic
oh,
impact it
wow.
is on the nervous system and having to restructure and rebuild and all these things, the destabilization. So yeah, I think when it comes to from that perspective, and you look how in the collaborative approach, everyone is speaking to each other and you're all
Mm,
working towards the same goal as opposed to everyone working at competing goals, right? So you're going at different directions. If you're going in different directions, it's going to be very hard to get an outcome where people feel positively about it, as opposed to working in the same general direction, which you may have different ideas about what that might look like, but the
mm,
common goal of we want it to be an outcome that serves us all, best case outcome, win-win, not getting the biggest piece of the pie. Not just looking after my own back, right, at the end
mm.
of the day, because that's what I need to do. I need to make sure I'm okay. Whereas when I look at parents, both parents need to be okay if children are going to
It's,
be best supported. Like not
it's really
just
interesting you
me,
say that, yeah.
both parents need to be, looked after in order
Mm.
for the children to be looked after. Um,
I, I think most collaborations I've had, because you share your goals in the big negotiation meeting, it's a really
yes.
good way to open up that empathy, I think. The number of times, I think the most common goal is I want a house to live in and I want them to have a house to live in. I want them to
Mm,
be okay and I want to be okay. And that is such a powerful statement, I think, when they both agree on that, because we're walking in the same direction.
yeah.
We're trying to get there. you're right. Rather than trying to just maximize your own share of the pie,
Exactly.
it's a
And I
much.
think, go on.
Oh no, it's just a much nicer
Yeah.
way to
Yeah,
practice.
yeah, and I think it's so much more important, particularly in the current climate when the housing crisis and we're
Mm,
experiencing, and getting new housing is actually not as simple as people think it is. It is
yeah.
actually, you really need to take a really considered approach. So if you're both going to be well, be able to set up again in a two household, new family structure as opposed to a single household. So I feel like this framework is going to be becoming more and more essential if we're going to be making sure people have best case outcomes moving through separation and actually able to set themselves up again. It's not as easy as what it once was.
I think about the point you made about the parenting and the kind of the overhang, the 2 year overhang after
Hmm.
one of these matters goes through. I don't know the answer to this, but do you feel like the collaborative process can lead to a quicker outcome than a traditional litigated one?
If you're actually going to court, absolutely. Like in terms of
Yeah,
legal litigation, because the issue with I suppose, going to litigation is usually there's a period of, 12 to 18 months, sometimes 2 years before you even get to court of stuff happening, and then it's a court. So whilst the court process may only be 2 years, realistically, it's 4 or 5 years of challenge.
limbo.
Yeah, that's right. And uncertainty and that fear and being in that stress state. Whereas in a collaborative process, I feel like you're supportive throughout the process and you actually know things are happening and you're moving in a direction and that you're not unified and reaching, out goals that are going to see you both be okay. So that immediately is already bringing you down to a more regulated space in the uncertainty, right? As
Mm,
opposed to
mm,
the other space where there's so much uncertainty, the court can make any decision they want
yeah,
based within the realms of evidence, right? But realistically, it's in someone else's hands. You're not, that's
that,
a disempowered state to be in. But yeah, I do think it could be a much quicker process for sure for many people. Than going through if you then having to go for court. I mean, of course, if you just go through lawyers, you can resolve it at mediation before court anyway. I mean, that's
yeah.
possible. But still, for most people, I personally feel collaborative is a better option because you're working together as opposed to competing.
You
And
don't spend as much time in that heightened state.
yeah, that's right. And also you're breaking it up into smaller segments
Yeah,
of engagement where you have time to actually properly consider and process information as opposed to being almost, kind of pressured into making a decision today about really big life decisions.
yeah.
Okay.
The 1 day
Yeah,
mediation where you have
yeah,
to
the
make
one
all
day
the decisions about
mediation,
your
yeah.
life.
So
Oh,
I do feel like that having that space to be able to come through and regulate and come back down and be, come to terms with your decision and agreement as opposed to making the agreement and then having that regret the next day that a lot of people experience
yeah.
because weren't clear-headed. Doesn't mean it's not the right decision. It's just that because they weren't in a clear regulated space, it's really much harder to feel good about it.
You
Right?
can still regret it. I think
Yeah.
the parenting piece is really, I mean, a big thing of collaborative is that parenting, learning how to communicate as parents, because now you're
Mm.
co-parenting. All the issues you had as parents before are now worse.
Yeah.
So you try to navigate a way around that because I keep thinking it's probably something that's evolved since I've had kids. You only have X number of years with your kids. Do you really
Mm.
want to spend 4 or 5 of them in a battle zone? And again, respecting that in ma some matters, that's kind of required
It
because
is,
things are
yes.
really toxic and dire.
Yeah.
But I just think there's that chunk that are landing in a default pathway that maybe that doesn't need to be their reality, and maybe they could be in
Hmm.
that place for 18 months rather than 4 years, and that's more time you
Absolutely.
have with your kids.
No, I agree with that piece as well. And like you say, it's not just if you're in that situation where you know, unnecessarily fall into that default pathway, well, then you're setting yourself up to have a strained relationship beyond that as well
Yeah,
because of the conflict, right? And unnecessarily so for, many people, for the category that it is generally unnecessary. Like you say, there is the exception where where there is abuse and severe
yeah,
issues that mean that, sometimes you have to take more protective approaches.
yeah.
Yeah, so that's a different kettle of fish. But even there, if we're talking about mental health challenges and things like that, my understanding is that, and experience is that, sometimes a collaborative approach can be really helpful there too, particularly if the person is wanting to get treatment and wanting to be the good parent and wanting to do all the right things to get themselves in a space where you can both be well and good parents and working together collaboratively to make these things happen.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, there's really circumstance dependent with those complex issues and
It
complex
is.
issues
Yeah,
require specialized input but yeah I do think there's just far more opportunity for better outcomes in the collaborative process.
agreed.
So yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah, thank you. So I tell me now, what do your clients say about working with you? What are they, What are their feedback about, either a collaborative approach or just generally how you help them?
I it's probably partly because the clients that I like to work with are the clients I talk to a lot, and they're the ones that we all do the marketing to, and that's who we try to attract is people that are sort of in their 50s and 60s, inexperienced with money and intimidated by what's to come next.
Yeah.
So I think for those people, they're looking for people to trust, and I think there's a real alignment in the way that I like to work, which is we work methodically, comprehensively, but we don't rush people. Like we
Mm,
don't sit on our hands for ages, but we work to the pace that people need. Now, what people have said is our knowledge of the family law process in particular means that we know when to push and when to hold. And
mm,
we know how to speak the language with the family lawyers and be that conduit sometimes for the information back. And so I think they appreciate having that person in their corner who they can trust, who knows the process and knows the rules of the game, um, but that they can talk to without feeling out of their depth. I think I'm very proud, and I hope this is the case for everybody that we work with. But I don't make people feel dumb, and that's a really
mm.
big part of what we do. It's really
Amazing.
important we're empowering people.
Yeah, and I love what you said there as well about how you know when to push and when to pause. Because like you
Yeah.
said, when it comes to digesting financial information, this is something that I also speak into my clients quite frequently. In the program I'm revamping now around financial separation is understanding that people have different paces that they process financial
Mm,
information and may need to make big decisions. Some people are really be able to move it through really quick and prompt and get yet be really decisive. Other people need more time. And that can be because, they may not feel confident. There could be other things going on, like you say, mental health. That could be, meaning they may need a bit more time to digest things, or neurodiversities as well. That mean people digest things differently. And I think having some compassion and understanding around that can be most helpful and getting clear, okay, well, if they're in that space, what support do they need to get clear? And, you're one of the people who might be able to support people in that space to get clear. And not necessarily, just jumping, stamping your feet and saying, you have to do it right now, or I'm going to take you to court, because that's just going to
yeah.
exacerbate the underlying issue, which is I need support and I just need a little
Yes.
bit of time to process. I'm not saying going to take forever, but I just need a little bit of time. So just, if we can just pause for a minute and breathe and, do what we need to do, then that can, avoid unnecessary conflict.
And that's a big part, I think, in my advice practice, because yeah, in the advice practice, one thing we have realized is that people have different learning styles, they have different approaches to
Mm.
communication. So just dumping a PDF in front of somebody isn't going to work for a lot of people. So we have
Mm.
videos. I'll record a video walking through the advice and we send that out a few days beforehand so they can sit on it and watch it. And we get all the stats. And they're normally watched 3 or 4 times before we meet people,
Wow, that's
just so to
incredible.
make
Love
nothing
that.
lands.
Yeah.
We use charts and graphs and we try to find different ways to communicate because some of
Mm.
these concepts are pretty complicated. And like you've said, the the impact and the consequences of these decisions are huge and people get nervous. So, that's something that we're always trying to improve in that space. We have a few people at the moment where they're really procrastinating. I think they're in a bit of a freeze. So we're trying to
Mm.
unpack how we can help them through that. But yeah, it's just recognizing each person has their own approach.
Mm. And I think it's an important part too is recognize when people might be in a free state again about understanding, okay, if they're in that state, well, what can we do to support them to get out of that state?
Yeah.
Right? Because again, if you're just going to add fire to that, that's not going to help the free state. That's going to push them more into a free state, right? It's going to be counterproductive. Yeah, so again, having that understanding, which again, I think a lot of is lacking for a lot of this approaches to traditional approaches to family law is having that, I suppose, trauma-informed awareness about, how people may show up in the space, which is
Yeah.
not necessarily deliberate or to harm or to control, or, all these other, means that labels people may give them in the process.
Mm.
So yeah, yeah, love that insight, Jordan. Thank you. Yeah, so I'm just conscious of our own time. I don't want to keep you too much longer, but I will
Thank
ask
you.
you, I suppose, what is one big oversight or misstep that you see, that people have made that could be overcome by working with someone like yourself in the process where they come to you maybe later down the track. If they had to come to you sooner, it might have been avoided, right?
I think the first one, and we've talked about it already, so I'll skip it pretty briefly, but
Yeah.
it's just goal setting. Like just
Yeah.
sitting down with somebody and actually setting the goals for what you want out of the process, incredibly vital, incredibly important. The big one, though, the big one I would say is the instinct that a lot of people have, and it's understandable, but the instinct, I need to keep the family home. And
Mm,
I'll move heaven and earth to make sure I keep the family home. Now, where that gets really difficult is if you keep the family home and that's a large part of the pool, or it's a big part of your percentage of the pool, how are you going to live? How are you going to afford life? And often
mm,
we're trying to hold on to memories and a life that's no longer there, or that we're grieving, and the home is the representation of that. In
Yeah.
my experience, and I will stand corrected by child psychologists or anything like that, in my experience, my belief, kids would prefer you to see be unstressed in a different house than super stressed in the old house. And
Yes.
so I
Yeah.
think just being deliberate and intentional around the housing aspect, I've seen people hold on to the family home and they set themselves broke by trying to
Yeah.
keep this thing together. And that's probably something I'd encourage people to reconsider sometimes.
Yeah, I love that you brought that very human emotional aspect into that piece as well, because that's something I also coach people through about the family home. It's like, okay, if you're feeling a strong resistance to, moving, selling this family home, get really clear about why that is. It'd be
Mhm.
very valid that you might have, emotional attachment to that. And if that's there, well, let's address it. Let's not shove it down and pretend it's not there because it's really
Yeah.
valid.
Mm.
And sometimes we may just need some time to process that, move through that, let go, sometimes as it may be, and it is a grieving process, a grieving of the life that you're going to have, the future where you imagine you'd have your children's birthday parties or maybe their wedding or whatever it may be, and having to release around that. And that's the emotional aspect that, is often not addressed in the process, but with a collaborative approach. With my support, with my clients, I do help them address those aspects so that they can move forward with the best decision as opposed to one that may be driven by that inability or the struggle with letting go, right?
Yeah.
Around that piece. And again, very valid, very human,
Completely
but
valid. Yeah.
yeah, but it may lead to decisions that are not the best outcome or in line with your goals. So getting clear on that, I think, is really important. So thank you for touching on another really important piece
No,
there.
that's
I love it.
it's where I find working with a coach as well really useful because we can talk about the financial reality, but we can't force people to make decisions based on that
Mm.
because then they'll just regret it. So that's where working together can go really well, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Appreciate that. Okay. And what's your top tip? I think we probably already covered it. I was going to ask your top tip for people moving in the separation process,
It's goal
but
setting.
goal setting. Yeah. Setting goals, getting clear, getting some
Um,
clarity before you perhaps, set your pathway through how you're going to resolve things, whether that's collaborative or
yeah,
traditional or whatever it may be, get clear on those goals. And before you head into negotiate, full negotiation as well, you want to be clear as to what you're going to achieve. Otherwise, again, it's like you're negotiating underwater. It's like, where am I
yeah.
going? So,
I'd say
yeah.
definitely goal setting, and I think this is going to resonate definitely with you and your listeners. But it's
Mm,
being clear on your value. I think we
mm,
don't do that generally as a society. But if
mm.
you can, at some stage early in the process, work through what's very important to you and what your values are, and they'll drive you through the goals and through the process. That'll let you conduct yourself through the process as much as you can in line with your own values. And I think that leaves you with less regret at the end. And
Yeah.
yeah, values and goal setting. That'd be my big top tip.
Yeah. 100% agree with that. 100%. And when I work with clients as well, it's about like an intention for the process. What is your intention? So how do you want to achieve
Yeah,
it? Is your intention that you want everyone to be well and happy and whatever? And whenever you're feeling, flustered or in a piece, if you come back to that intention, it can really ground you into saying, is this decision aligned with what I intend for here? And if it's not, well, maybe we might need to reconsider and,
yeah.
helping to stay grounded in the process. So, yeah,
I
really
was gonna
great.
say your intention will always be respected by the other side, but at least you can respect it for yourself.
But that's right. That's right. We can't control other people. But we can show up in the way that we want to show up for ourselves and how we
Yeah,
want our children to see us, right? Yeah.
yeah,
Mm.
exactly.
Well, thank you so much for that. And if anyone wants to get into contact with you or figure out how they can work with you, I know that you're down in Victoria, but you do work across the country.
I
So
do, yes.
how can they get in contact there with you, Jordan?
So easiest way is planningsolo.com.au. That's the website there. There's some information there. You can get in touch. I also have a podcast that I run with another advisor called Weaving Gold. That's for people that we like to work with and is try to keep it short, snippets of information that'll be practical, or useful for them. And it's in those mainstreams: divorce, bereavement, retirement, and he does a lot of aged care work. So Weaving Gold is another way to find out a bit more about how we work.
And is that podcast, is that like a Spotify or YouTube or where is that?
Uh, It's only on Spotify. It's only on all the audio ones.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
say that because he said he'll do the video editing, and I'm staying away from it. So I think it's a little ways away yet because it
All
seems like a
good.
big job.
Totally appreciate that. Amazing. All right. Well, yeah, thank you for that. And yeah, I'll make sure I have those details in the content, written content to this segment, so everyone can contact you and reach out to you if they need to get some further support with the financial planning side, and particularly if they want to take a collaborative approach.
Fantastic. No, I really appreciate it. Thank you so much for having me, Cara. I've enjoyed our chat. Yeah, it's great finding people that are looking to help people through this journey. I think in the same way. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Much appreciated. Have a good day. Bye.
Cheers.